I think, Mr. Goldstein, I'll direct this to you. You had stated in your testimony that one of the barriers to increasing access on tribal lands is the cost of providers that are deploying infrastructure onto tribal lands, and that there are a number of federal programs that subsidize broadband deployment in these areas, but you have expressed concern that the return on investment hasn't attracted that private investment. We certainly see that. Any suggestions that you can provide in terms of what more can be done to encourage these public-private partnerships for the broadband deployment? We've got some things that are going on in Alaska that we're excited about, but access to capital is a challenge.
Thank you, Senator. I think it's no coincidence that all of the partnerships that we identified, and there were only 7 that we were able to identify. There may be others out there, but we looked at grants and
Right.
all the federal funds to try and discern what the partnerships were. All of the partnerships that we found, the funds that they received came from ERA, the Recovery Act funds. They did not come from current funds. And so I think you're right in saying that this is an issue of capital, and the amount of funding that's going to Indian country may not be sufficient to entice providers. And as we indicated earlier in our testimony, of all the funds that are provided by the FCC and by RUS, just a very small fraction of those funds have actually gone to tribal lands.
Right. It just seems like it's such a challenge because in so many of these areas, you're remote, so you're truly, in Alaska, we're literally at the end of the line, and of course we know how expensive that is. But the areas that you're serving, the population base is so small. So how is that attractive to anybody from an investment perspective? So you recognize the challenge, but you don't have any super duper great answers on how we can attract it.
I'd probably be in a different line of business if I did, ma'am.
Yeah, we all would. I thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have well consumed my time, but I appreciate the committee working on these issues because it does make a big difference in terms of how we can help to provide opportunities around Indian country. If you're not at the same, if you're not on the same field, it's really pretty tough to play the game. So thank you, sir.
You're absolutely right. And Mr. Weber, are you happy to take her question back to the proper bureau and get an answer for her on the one she asked?
Yes, Senator,
Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
That would be great.
And if I could make a kind of a distinction, a point, we've heard today about the GAO's second report on partnerships and how less than 1% of the FCC's funding has gone to tribes. I think what that really means is less than 1% of the funding has gone to tribally owned entities. There are plenty of privately owned entities that aren't affiliated with the tribes that are serving broadband in these tribal communities. So I do think that number is much higher. Thank you.
Will you get us a proper answer under the criteria you're laying out?
We can certainly look into that data for you, sir, yes.
Yeah. Senator Murkowski, if you have any additional questions, please go ahead.
No, I was just looking at some of the information that I have here. It says that, as you mentioned, GAO found that less than 1% of FCC funding, about 14% of RUS funding went directly to tribes and tribally owned providers. Combined, FCC and RUS funding totaled $34.6 billion during that time period, and tribes and tribally owned providers received $235 million, or about 0.7%. So, I mean, I think it does speak to the real challenge that we face here.
To be clear again, that is tribally owned
Tribally
entities.
owned, right.
There are plenty of private providers who are out there providing service. As a matter of fact, the Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction just took place, and the preliminary numbers are in. Over 80,000 of those bidders, 80,000 tribal areas will be covered by Connect America Fund 2 funding. And some are going to be serviced by tribally owned entities, and we will work with them to get ETC status so they can provide those broadband deployment funds to their areas.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Angetti was...
One thing I wanted to add to that, on the portion of funding that you're talking about, especially grant money, there's a lot of money out there for grants, and the ARA was one of the things that you guys talked about. But the biggest things that I've seen come back to us from our NTTA members is that when they took that ARA money, they lost a lot of their sustainability funding coming from the FCC. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing is once you build it, you've got to maintain it, and most tribes don't have that ability to do that. The high cost fund is one of the mechanisms that was used to be able to provide funding for that to keep sustainability moving forward. But a lot of that has been reduced, and we have a hard cap on us at the for small ILECs like us. And there's also a budget control mechanism that's involved in that keeps us getting all the funds that we need. And there's been a catch-up fund that's been, the FCC has instituted to kind of get us caught up. But moving forward, that still has to be in play for us to be able to provide the services that we need. We build these networks, but we got to maintain it, make sure the fiber is maintained. Today, I had a fiber cut in Mescalero, so got to roll people out there, got to get things fixed. These are some of the things that we have to pay for as we keep moving forward, and we hope that keep that funding up and capable for us to use it and take the needs that we need out of it.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.